Unitarian Universalist Church of Plano online. At Community UU, we work for justice, nourish spirits, and transform lives. My name is Jeanette Bailey, and I am one of the worship associates here at the church. Whether you are a church member, a new or longtime visitor, or you just found this video online, may you find connection with us and food for your mind and spirit. Our service for today is titled Racism and Religion, a UU History. As a faith community, we acknowledge that there are many ways in which many religions have supported unjust actions over time. We have the chance to learn about this now with clear eyes and honest hearts. Pastor Kiya Heartwood leads us today for this insightful service. Please get comfortable and enjoy the music and the message. Even when our hearts are broken by our own failure, or the failure of others cutting into our lives, even when we have done all we can and life is still broken, there is a universal love that has never broken faith with us and never will. We Unitarian Universalists don't drink from our chalice. Instead, we use it to hold the flame. The circle of the chalice keeps the fire small. The flame doesn't blind us. It doesn't burn us. It gives us light so that we can see all the different things in the universe, even the invisible ones, because the Unitarian Universalist flame is a light of learning.
Tried to fit, we tried to bend, fix all our broken places, wishing we could mend. So we stand here with these scars, naked, and we trace our fingers lightly over yours. Where are our better angels, beautiful and wise? We pledge our first allegiance to the love that's in our eyes, in our eyes. After midnight, rage and fires light. Some are shaking with despair, so many dead and silent. Are we brave enough? Are we strong enough to listen and to care? Where are our better angels, beautiful and wise? We pledge our first allegiance to the love that's in our eyes, in our eyes. So much history, can we change it? For we know that time is running like a river through our hands. Tell the stories that must be told. Make us whole so we will rise, dream and breathe.
Unitarian Universalism is a covenantal denomination. We hold that we do not have to believe alike in order to love alike. In this and every UU community, there is a diversity of personal creeds, but there is one covenant for this church. And this covenant is about the ways we promise to be in relationship with each other and the wider community. We recommit ourselves to these promises each time we recite this church's covenant, and each time we gather, we recite it again. Please join with me now. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another.
Abide with me. Fast falls the eventide. The darkness deepens. Still with me abide. When other helpers fail and comforts flee, help of the helpless, oh, abide with me. Swift to its close, ebbs out life's little day. Earth's joys grow dim, its glories pass away. Change and decay in all around I see. O thou who changes not, abide with me. We need each other every passing hour. Channels of grace and life affirming power. Faithful companions share this path with me. Through all our fears and hopes, abide with me. Good morning, everybody. This is the story for all ages. I'm Pastor Kiya Heartwood. I'm going to tell you a story that's about consent and how each of us has control over our own body, and we can say yes or no about whether people can come near to us or touch us. And we can say no and we can say yes, boys and girls. And if we honor other people and we respect them, we should listen to their opinions about their own bodies as well. So when someone says no, they mean no. The story today is an amazing story called Don't Touch My Hair, and it's by Cherie Miller. I'm Aria, and this is my hair. I love my hair. It's soft and bouncy and grows up toward the sun like a flower. I love it, up or down, styled or wild. I don't care. I just want it to be free. Actually, everyone loves my hair too. When I walk down the street, I hear so many compliments. It's so big. How do you get it so fluffy? I wish I had hair like that. It's great that people love my hair, but some love it so much they want to touch it. I don't like this. What does it feel like? They are so curious about my hair that they try to touch it without even asking for permission. Oh, I want to feel. Me too. I get very good at avoiding hands. I have to start looking for ways to hide my hair. I try blending in with the scenery, but I'm quickly spotted. Over here! I tried hiding underwater, but that doesn't last long. Oh, wow, I love your hair. Can I touch it? I escape to the jungle, but the critters just can't keep their hands to themselves. Let me touch. No, me. Me first. Even in the tallest castle tower, someone is always there, ready and waiting to touch my hair. Girl, your hair is fierce. No matter how far I go, it just doesn't seem to matter. How do you get it so big? Finally, I find a place where no one wants to touch my hair. But after a few hours, I get lonely. I decide to go home. I try my best to ignore the attention, but as a hand sinks into my hair, well, it looks so soft. Oh, it is soft. I decide I can't take it anymore. That's it. That's enough. Don't touch my hair. This is my hair. It's great that you love it. I love it too. But please just look and don't touch without my permission. The next time someone wants to touch my hair, they ask, "Can I touch your hair?" I reply, "Not today." Okay, now it feels great to walk down the street without anyone trying to touch my hair. My curls are free to reach for the sun, just like a flower. Some people still ask to touch my hair, but if I say no, they listen. But if you ask nicely, sometimes I say yes. The end.
Heartwood holds a Master's of Divinity from the Star King School for the Ministry and is a UU ministerial candidate. Kiya has had a long career as a musician, speaker, and creator of good in the world. She serves at the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Brazos Valley, as well as the Unitarian Universalist Church of Victoria, Texas.
Good morning. Today we're talking about a very difficult subject. We're talking about race and faith. I'm talking about how white supremacy is built into the structure of our institutions, even our religious ones, in the United States and actually around the world. I particularly want to focus on Unitarian Universalism and as a separate things and then together. Because all we can do is start with ourselves. Harvard history professor and Radcliffe Dean Tomiko Brown-Nagin writes, "We cannot dismantle what we do not understand, and we cannot understand the contemporary injustice we face unless we reckon honestly with our history." Yeah, I may end up talking a lot about Harvard today. Harvard's president, Drew Faust, says, "The past never dies or disappears. It continues to shape us in ways we should not try to erase or ignore." I think this is a very interesting period of time in our Black Lives Matter kind of universe, dealing with the underbelly of the United States, the parts of racism that we carry within ourselves because we're built by our society. And these aspects of racist thinking and prejudice are built into every structure, not just schools or government, but also into religion. These people brought their religion with them, their structures of religious belief, and also their beliefs around racial superiority. If we're saying that America, a lot of its financial building was built around slavery, and chattel slavery was important to all the industries, whether north or south. The Jesuits themselves had over 1,000 slaves, and a lot of their expansion into America was built on selling slaves. In the 1600s, when Harvard starts, half the ships in the Boston Harbor were involved in some aspect of slave trading. The halls of Harvard are built on money that was based in West Indies sugar and rum plantations. Harvard lent money to these people. These people gave endowments to the school. Many of the presidents of Harvard brought their slaves with them. There were slaves in Massachusetts until the Civil War. The country was built on that. The textile industry, even if the people who later did not have slaves themselves, were dependent upon the cotton industry to provide the raw materials, and that cotton was raised by slaves. The Unitarian Church is so involved in the ministers that were taught at Harvard. Harvard began in 1636 to educate ministers from the standing order, from the Puritans, from the people who came over, the Pilgrims. People had a certain idea about the superiority of Western civilization, i.e. Anglo-Saxons, and a belief in a scientific idea of racism that believed that blacks were inferior intellectually and morally, and that they needed the paternalism of the slave situation, and that the Bible condoned it. There's always the spiritual beliefs behind what happens that need to be challenged. And some of these things weren't challenged. Many of the students were from plantation families. And while Harvard had a reputation for raising abolitionists, those people were most likely the outsiders of Harvard culture. If you read about Theodore Parker or Thomas Wentworth Higginson, you're going to find that they were outsidered over their abolitionist beliefs. And even William Ellery Channing got grief for his abolitionist views from his congregation people, because their money was coming from a combination economy that was real dependent upon slavery. It's the second biggest slave market was in New York City before the Civil War. The more you study this, the more you get a realistic picture of how difficult it's going to be for us to dismantle this and to teach it to our children in a way that we are honoring the progress that's been made and the more perfect union, the more toward our principles. Even Jefferson's an excellent example. I know the church in Fort Worth is changing its name from the Jefferson UU, because Jefferson not only slept and had a sexual relationship with one of his slaves, but he owned 600 people. How do we live with this complicated culture? I think part of growing up and becoming a stronger country is facing these dark parts of our past. In some ways, the anti-Semitism and racism that's showing up in our culture now, kind of pro-fascist element, has always been there. But when we were in World War II against the Nazis, we became against those things. That generation is dying out. So we don't really have that element in our culture as much anymore. People are arguing about the book Mouse that talks about the Holocaust and banning it in books in Tennessee. There's a question about teaching the Holocaust to youth, and how much do you talk about the truth of the dark things that have happened in our culture, the nativism, the white supremacy, the separatism, the voting restrictions, all the elements of our culture that we need to challenge and question and really find out our own information about. So I'm going to just give you 4 different things to think about. It's not comprehensive in any way, but let's talk about race and religion. So I told you that the Catholic Church had slaves. Almost every church denomination in the United States, even the Quakers early on, had slaves, had slave owners. The Quakers were the first to come out against it, and our Universalists were the second church in the 1790s to come out and be anti-slavery. We have a lot of good things to be proud of, many abolitionists, but when you get into the actual history and realize how much grief they got from their congregations and how much the government was complicit in protecting slave owners' rights, because it was the economy of America for so long, for the United States for so long. No matter what church you want to study, the Presbyterians, the Baptists, the Methodists, there's a complicated history, and the church is often divided over slavery around the Civil War or after, and how they treated their black members and their indigenous members is real important to understanding how racism has survived so long in our culture and how difficult it's going to be to root out. Separating the Unitarian and the Universalist is our first step, because actually in the early part of the century, the Universalists were the bigger church. There was more Universalist churches in New England, mostly on the frontier in central Massachusetts is kind of the main place. The Universalists were much more diverse population-wise and class-wise. The Universalists were the first to support mixed congregations and often had them mixed marriages. Definitely the first to ordain women, work for suffrage, work for abolition. The Unitarians, as centered around Harvard, you can really start there. And Harvard has a very complex history. Every building that's pre-Civil War at Harvard has slave money in it. Many people who attended Harvard became slave owners or were from slave-owning families. It's complicated. and you can't just root it out. There's a real movement right now in the Ivy League schools to reveal their slavery connections. There was a lot of slavery connections in the North and the South, and not everybody who fought for the North was fighting for abolition. Its lack of action anti-slavery wise, and in scientific racism at Harvard that really influenced people's thinking about who the races, the difference in the races, and whether they came from Adam or not. From a Christian's perspective, that all the races were related, began to be argued as not being related. In a period of social Darwinism, the belief that, there's a hierarchy and that white Anglo-Saxons are at the top of that hierarchy and the other races are less fit. And what that leads to is a really complicated part of our history, early 1900s, late 1800s, called eugenics. Yes, in 1902, a book was published by the American Unitarian Association called The Blood of the Nation, a study of the decay of races through the survival of the unfit. And the author of this book was a very prominent Unitarian named David Starr Jordan. He was the president of Stanford University, and he was a renowned ichthyologist, which is a zoologist who studies fish. So he became a very sought-after speaker at Unitarian events. Between 1902 and 1916, he published 19 books with Beacon Press. He was the most prominent Unitarian author until World War II. Pacifist, and he was raised Universalist, but he believed that war was a biological evil and that it kills off the physically and mentally fit and leaves the less fit. And so the whole idea of eugenics is that unfit people breeding makes the entire human race less. And that if we focused our breeding on improving and sterilizing the people that should not breed and having more control over that, doing it scientifically, that we would have a more vital and strong human race, that it would be stronger, smarter. A lot of this thinking leads to the Nazis believing that they create a super race. But the start of it is down home and American and very Unitarian at the bottom. It's something that we should definitely not be that proud of. And it was very popular in the intellectual circles of Harvard and other places. 1924, there was actually a Virginia law aimed at the sterilization of the unfit. And it went to the Supreme Court. Oliver Wendell Holmes and William Howard Taft, two Unitarian greats, were on the court at that time and voted against the defendant, whose name was Carrie Buck. She was trying not to be sterilized under the new law, and they voted for her to be sterilized. They really bought into this eugenics thing. It's not pretty. Another very troubling aspect of Unitarian history has to do with the fellowship movement. And I really want to talk about a minister named Lon Ray Call. He was from North Carolina originally, and he went to Wake Forest. He was a real educated man, and he started out a Baptist and then switched over to Unitarian. He served the church in Louisville, Kentucky, actually, in the 1920s. He was a really interesting person. He got to work for the American Unitarian Association as kind of an evangelical minister, and he worked on increasing the churches. He worked specifically to start fellowships, which were lay-led. And he had really strong ideas about Unitarians appealed to and where those fellowships should start. He really tried to get 50 families to start a fellowship. And he particularly went for overeducated places, college towns. And he thought white and suburban and college towns. And he really focused that. And so a lot of the decisions that he made in the 40s and late 40s led to a growth that now 30% of our congregations out there in the world come from his evangelical work. what's really interesting to me is that as we struggle for why we're such a white denomination and why our churches are where they are, you can go right back to Reverend Call and his belief in what a Unitarian population is, who and who is not going to join the church. We have to undo some of his work to grow, and we have to undo some of his work to be the diverse, beloved communities that we want to be. And the last part I want to talk about is what's called the Black empowerment controversy. In the 60s, in the late 60s, in 1967, there was a really strong movement to financially support Black Unitarians deciding for themselves where they were going to put their focus. And this controversy, but the basics of it are, in 1967, following the racial violence in Newark and Detroit, the UUC Commission on Religion and Race convened an emergency conference. And the conference was called the Unitarian Universalist Response to the Black Rebellion. At the conference, a group was formed called the BUUC, or the Black Unitarian Universalist Caucus. And in order for the Black participants at the conference to set their own priorities and goals, that it was a separatist group, and that it was for Black UUs. And they formed a Black Affairs Council, which was a committee that coordinated Unitarian Universalist efforts in the fields of race empowerment. There was a white support network or BAC, and it was called Full Recognition and Funding of the Black Affairs Council, or FULBAC. So it starts out like this, and General Assembly, has conversations and they decide things. So basically, in 1968, some UUs felt that the Black Affairs Council was too separatist, and they wanted to start a group that was for both Blacks and white in the same organization, and that one was called BAWA, or Black and White Action. All these people are talking, and basically $1 million was going to go toward Black empowerment, and General Assembly was going to vote this $1 million over 4 years to the organizations. The way the Unitarian Universalist does its money is not necessarily the most democratic way, in that the Board of Trustees are responsible for the budgets and money allocation, and General Assembly can make suggestions, but it's the Board of Trustees that decides. And when you have financial problems with the budget already that most people are not aware of, you're just setting up a situation for a complicated exchange of ideas. Plus, the late 60s were fiery. I encourage you to find out more about it, but the short story is this. They voted at General Assembly to allocate the $1 million. The next year, the Board of Trustees were not comfortable with it, and it came up again and was not agreed upon. The people who were supporting the fullback people and the people who were involved in BUUC and a lot of the LRY, the youth groups, they all walked out of General Assembly, and they left and went over to Arlington Street Church and walked out. And so some of the Black UUs and some of the people who were very involved in trying to get that money to the Black empowerment groups left Unitarianism and early UUism. And it didn't get resolved really until the last couple of years. There are a lot of really great sermons out there if you want to read more about this. And you can definitely read more about it on the UUA website, on the UU World website. This conflict has reverberations all the way down to the present time. There's other things that we should be proud of. For example, when Dr. King invited the UU ministers to come to Selma in 1968, 2/3 of the working ministers in our denomination went to Selma. And that's something we should be proud of. So there are a lot of good and bad stories in our history. we need to become more aware of and understand the very complicated backstories of, so that we can help dismantle the white supremacy that still exists in our denomination. The movement toward the eighth principle and a lot of the decisions the UUA are making right now are built on dismantling white supremacy. And first thing that we can do, the people, Unitarian Universalism, is to educate ourselves and not expect only our members of color to educate us. We need to educate ourselves, everybody. Get wise on these things. I hope this is a profitable and interesting conversation for you, and I enjoyed speaking to you today. Thank you.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. There is more joy somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more joy
Our wish at Community UU Church is to cultivate a spirit of gratitude and generosity in all things. This beloved community is a living thing, and we bring much to it by our presence, our love, our caring, our generosity, and our hard work. We may be fed by it in equal or even larger measure. We encourage you to give as you are able so that the good works of our church may continue. We also remind you that the Share the Plate beneficiary for the month of January 2022 is our own community harvest garden. This important outreach project of our church provides fresh produce for those living with food insecurity in our area. You can make your donation by sending a check to the church building address, which you can find on the front page of our website. You can also donate by visiting the website and clicking on the blue Donate Now button on the front page. On behalf of our community, your generosity is deeply appreciated. As our worship time draws to a close, it is time for us to extinguish the chalice. Please recite these words with me now. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Remember the way of the wind, and breathe and blow. Remember the way of the fire, sparkle and glitter and glow. Remember the way of the water, and ebb and flow. Remember the way of the earth, and grow. Go in peace.